So welcome to the 24th Annual Capitol Conference Virtual Edition. It is our goal that each session is about an hour in length. However, we may go a little longer or we may be shorter. My name is David Stevens, and I'm the Director of Academic Activities for UIL. Also helping with this session is Linda Munoz, Administrative Assistant for UIL Academics. You often get many emails from her and hear from her a lot, but now you get to maybe see her face. This session is running a high school district meet. Our presenter is Kimberley Sloane. Kimberley is from Chireno ISD. She hosts big meets and small meets, A+ meets, high school meets. She works with groups of people and hosts meets, so I can't think of anyone better who's going to be able to give you the information that you need for today. So Kimberley, welcome. We're glad you're here, and thank you very much for being willing to share your wisdom and knowledge with our attendees in this new format of Capitol Conference.
I am glad to be here. As Dr. Stevens said, I am Kimberley Sloane. I am our UIL coordinator for grades 2 through 12 at Chireno ISD because we are a small 1A school. So I get to see UIL from those very little babies that start in at storytelling all the way up through their senior year. So it's a pretty good honor and get to really watch it. And then I guess you could say that's why it's my passion and why I love it so much, because I really do see the whole gamut of how it makes a difference in students' lives. I have been running high school district meets for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years in some form or fashion. Typically, now that we only have 1 week to do UIL districts, I have one every single day that I'm either running or assisting running. So I'll run 6 meets that week. So over the years, we've just kind of developed a system, and this presentation basically revolves around the system that we use to run the meets here in the East Texas area for the 6 that we do. And a lot of these, if you happen to run an invitational meet, a lot of these things we do for invitational meets as well. So it would help you there as well if you needed to run an invitational meet, if we even get to run invitational meets in this next school year. Let me see how to advance this. There it goes. Okay, so the first thing is, if you've just found out, or if you find out when you get to go back to school that this is your job, is to take a deep breath and not stress. It's really not as difficult as it seems when you first make that first glance at it. So I would take this presentation and any information you can find and just start with a checklist and start working your way through that checklist. And then it's not nearly as overwhelming. I typically maintain 2. So I have the one that is scary and lists every single thing that I hope to accomplish before the day of district, or even through after district really. But then I just pull off piecemeal things off of it, and I say, okay, these are the next 5 things I need to do. This is my current checklist. And so that is my system for not getting overwhelmed, especially when we have so many that we're trying to run. And probably my number 1 tip is just don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't think that you need to figure this out and do it all on your own. My email was on the first slide, and I think it's also on the last or one at the very end. So you're always welcome to email me. The UIL office is great and wonderful, and during that time period especially, I think they're on call 24 hours a day, it seems like. You can reach somebody all the time. There's usually someone in your area that has run meets, so you may have someone local. And there's also now a Facebook group called UIL Academic Coordinators, and that's a great resource with a lot of experience as well if you're trying to figure something out that you're not quite sure how to do. And number 1 is always call Austin. I mean, absolutely, if you're in doubt, even after you've talked to somebody and you just don't think it feels right, call and figure it out. Whether you're in the planning stages or you are at contest that day. That's what they're there for. They are always friendly. I've never had anyone sigh or act like I was a problem when we called. They're there. So it's not, it's kind of a stigma. I've had coaches, like when they come to me that day of contest and I say, well, let's just call Austin. And they're like, oh, no, we don't need to do that. And I'm like, no, let's call Austin and make sure we do it right. So it's not scary, and it's not like a sign that you're not doing something right if you need to call them. So call. But the first thing you're going to really want to do when someone says, congratulations, you're hosting the meet this year, is find out what decisions were made before you were told that. Sometimes the superintendents in my area have already met, and there may be a school that's not participating in academics. So go ahead and find that out so that you don't waste time trying to contact them when they're not even going to be participating. I've been in instances where those superintendents also have already set the date and location. In our district, frequently one person orders all individual event medals. So I don't. They'll order track and cross country and all of those in a big bulk order. So you need to find out, is somebody else ordering them or is that job? Who is paying the bills? That's a pretty important thing to know. A lot of times it is the school that is hosting it and is in charge of it. But I have found a lot of times we find one business manager in a school that has done this before and they become that financial person forever. Like they can't get rid of the job. And it may not be my school where I'm from, even though I'm actually hosting the meet. So make sure you know who's going to pay all the bills in the end. Has a planning meeting been set by those superintendents who had that first meeting? Or is that something that you need to do? Does this also mean you're in charge of CX and one-act play? I mean, exactly what have you been signed on to do? Make sure you're aware. And if they've made any other decisions, I mean, I always ask that at the end. Is there anything else I need to know that you've already decided so that I don't, try to do something and you say, no, you can't do that. We decided this. So that is kind of, make sure you know what you've gotten into before you go any further. And once you've kind of found that all out and kind of wrapped your mind around it, it's time for you to start doing your planning. So the first thing I do is try to find as many UIL coordinator and principal emails as I can in that district. Because a lot of times I start with a superintendent list because they met, typically, I don't know if that happened this year, but typically they meet in the spring and they kind of start hashing some of this stuff out. And so they have an email list of superintendents. But that doesn't really help me because they don't really want to come to the academic planning meeting. So I have to call around, email around until I get as many of those coordinator or principal emails as I can so that I can then schedule that meeting for as soon as possible. I believe the deadline is October 1st next year if I looked at the calendar correctly. So you're going to make sure you've had that meeting at least by then, hopefully. I know this next school year is kind of going to be a little different, but you need to have that by then so that all of this can be worked out. If you're coming into a district, and I can use myself as an example this year, I'm moving into a district that I'm the newbie. They've all been together. Well, I'm going to contact somebody in that district once we get back to going to school and say, hey, how have y'all been doing things in the past? Where were you hosting meets? I mean, if there's a system worked out and it's good, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And especially if this is your first time to ever do it. Well, hey, if there's already a system, say, hey, share all that stuff with me, give me all that stuff, help me. I also actually print, I'm not digital, I print the academic coordinator's manual, the academic director's manual, and I print every single set of rules. And I put them in a huge binder. If the new one isn't out, I start reading the previous year. I don't necessarily print them all because that'd be a lot of paper, but we don't have a whole lot of rule changes from year to year in academics, so I can at least start getting some ideas from the old ones if I needed to. And here's one of my little tips is to actually read through those multiple times before your day of district meet. You want to become as familiar with as much as possible as you can. You won't know it all, but the more you read, the more you can go, oh, I at least know there is a rule for that. I read that. Because there's no way with our 20 plus events that you're going to remember everything. But the more you read, the more familiar you do become. And then you're going to need to build your schedule. And that, of course, will depend on where you're going to host your meet. I know that in some larger districts, they have high schools that are big enough to host, and you may have it at your own school. We have 10 rooms in our high school. Actually, I should say secondary. For 7th through 12th grade, we have 10 classrooms. There is no way that we could host one feasibly, at least not easily. So we go to a local university, and we go to Stephen F. Austin. And so when you're building that schedule, you want to be wherever it's going to be in person. You need to see the rooms. Make sure that they're big enough for what you think that you're going to put there. And just make sure it will all work. And you're going to need to, in addition to just figuring out the times of events, you're going to need to make sure that you have a place for a tab room. If you have a separate speech director who's going to be running the speech events, you may want 2 tab rooms. You may want one for testing and one for speech. You need a hospitality area, a student holding area. You need somewhere for judges to hang out when they're not working. You need a grading area. I try to have a separate grading area for writing judges, and if I can pull it off, I actually do a ready writing room and a journalism room because they communicate a lot while they're grading. So it can be very frustrating to try to grade where someone's right beside you is grading number sense. Computer apps in science and now our writing events use computers. You're going to want to make sure you have rooms that are capable electricity-wise of holding that many computers and printers. If possible, I also put spelling and computer applications somewhere quiet to grade, because those are also, well, spelling is just a nightmare. I apologize if you ever have to grade spelling. And computer applications, they do a lot of communication with each other as well while they grade. And I've just found that those coaches really appreciate a quiet area to grade in. I make note when I'm touring wherever I'm going to be of how many each room is going to sit comfortably. For example, science is allowed 6 entries each. Well, I need to make sure the room is big enough to hold 6 entries from every school. I decide where verification is going to happen. And then as I'm assigning competition rooms, this is another one of my little tips, tricks of the trade. If at all possible, I don't use a room back to back in the time schedule, because you've got kids exiting and kids leaving. Your contest director would really like to go set up a little early, but if there's another contest right before that, they can't. And so when I can avoid using a room back to back, I do. Now that's not always possible, but I try. It seems that you can stay on schedule a lot better if you are able to pull that one off. Here are just some examples as you're planning. This is the ballroom at Stephen F. Austin, where we set our high school, it meets up. And this would be a view of all the students. You notice we've got a really large room where they can really separate. I guess today we would call that social distancing. But we can all find a space and they quickly go in there, and it actually has even become a habit. I can promise you at this point, when I walk in, I know where school X's tables are because they go back to the same area every year. And so you can go find them as well when you need to clear up a problem. I didn't move, okay. Here was our designated grading year area, the year that I actually took this picture, and this is just actually that stage in the same ballroom. So it's not a completely different area, but it is separate. I like when we're able to set it up where it is in the holding area. I know it probably gets loud and they may not like it so much, but I find we get more graders if they can be supervising their students at the same time. Like they don't have as many excuses to not be up there grading if you can put it real close together. In my ideal situation, we've also been able to have them grade in contest rooms when the event was over. That way the papers never left. They just kept them right there and coaches came in and graded. It's rare that I have a place where I have enough room to do that. We usually are going to need the rooms again that day. But that's another idea if you're looking for how to set up grading. How will your results be set up? Like, how are you going to let the kids know how they did? If you've opened it up on the UIL website, I mean, people can see, but I'm going to tell you, those kids still like to see it printed on paper. And so we're fortunate enough that we can set up like it is over in the corner. If you can see, there's little tabs and those little labels on that board, and that's each event. And so I put those up first thing in the morning, and then as the results come in, we just go tag those results right underneath their event so that they can find out how they've done. Additionally, you're going to want to know when it comes to results and materials, when you can release those materials. If you host your meet on Monday, you can't let them take those tests home Monday evening. In our planning meeting, we usually talk about awards. At the high school level, we tend to give them out as soon as they're verified and official. But I have seen where they're handed out, say like in an office separately to the adults and not given directly to the kids at that exact moment. And then the coach or the UIL coordinator goes and passes them out. But make sure you have a plan for how you're going to do awards to go with those results. If you're in the right location and you have the personnel, kids also like it when it's up on a PowerPoint. So I've seen districts where they would put a PowerPoint up that just had the results flashing by all day long as well. So after you've kind of made those decisions, you need to have your planning meeting and get with everyone in your district. So for that planning meeting, I create 1 or 2 folders for each school. And I make sure they have an agenda, a schedule, a conflict pattern, all of the documents that I can think of that they might need. And if I actually have time, I try to coordinate with their school colors, because then it's quick for me to pass them out as they come in if I happen to have anything specific for that school that I would want in their folder as well. I confirm all of my contact information for my principals and UIL directors that day. And I will tell you that I rarely use a principal email address, but I like to have them on file in case the UIL director isn't responding to my emails. And that may be that person was just out sick or for whatever reason. I mean, there may be a good reason they haven't replied, but sometimes you need an immediate answer. And so I just like to keep that principal's email in my back pocket. And every once in a while, I have a principal that actually wants to be kept in the general email loop and get all emails as well. I don't know if you can see me, but I do that on colored paper. That way, as papers are getting passed around in that meeting, it's easy to find my papers and get them back. So anything that gets passed around in a meeting that I want back, I try to find the brightest, loudest paper, and I give them that. That way, I can quickly get that back at the end of the meeting. We choose to have our teachers be the contest directors and assistants when we host our UIL meets. So we sign up that day. Who's going to run calculator? Who's going to run number sense? Who's going to run science? And then we also make sure there's an assistant in every room that is from a different school. And that's kind of our accountability system of no one hopefully can accuse that you gave your kids any favoritism if there's also an assistant in the room as well. If anyone wants to give judge recommendations or maybe request not to use a judge, I get those at that time for writing and speaking. As I said, I use colored paper for everything I want back. And I set an earlier deadline than the 10-day deadline that UIL recommends, just because I want a little more time to make sure I do everything correctly. So I'll usually go ahead and do a whole 14 days or maybe even 2.5 weeks. It kind of depends on where spring breaks are falling that year. But I try to set my deadline before I go on spring break so that I have spring break to get all the rosters printed and all of that stuff ready without the stress of trying to do that while I'm in school. So I set a deadline that's usually a little more than 10 days, just to give myself some breathing room. Those school folders that I mentioned, I at least try to make sure that I have an agenda for that particular meeting, a schedule that we're going to use at the meet, a map of the location, and if we're going to have a concession stand menu, I try to have that together by then. That way, kids know, hey, this is the eating option. If I have time, I also add in a conflict pattern and a substitute form and a professional acknowledgement form. I know that coordinators can go pull all that stuff from the UIL website, but especially we tend to have a lot of turnover. And so we have a lot of new UIL coordinators and they're just overwhelmed at the idea of being a UIL coordinator. And so I figure any of that little stuff that I can throw in a folder that helps them not have to hunt it down is the better. I also look up all the practice meets that are going to be within about an hour of us, and I'll put that in there because a lot of times they don't even know practice meets exist. And now that the virtual meet has started forming and is pretty popular, I usually put a registration form for that in there as well, as it's maybe more affordable for the small schools in my area to be able to practice without travel. So those are the things that I put in the school folders at the planning meeting. The special things that you need to make sure you consider and plan for in that meeting is spelling. Who is going to pronounce the spelling words? Okay, is that going to be a hired person? Who's going to hire that person? Writing, is that going to be a hired personnel? Are you going to use a one person or a panel of 3 or a panel of 5? How much are they going to get paid? And kind of the same token for speech. Who's going to hire those speech judges? How many? What criteria are you going to use for hiring them? You want to make sure everybody's on the same page as far as writing and speech judges and that, know how that's going to work. How will poetry and prose documentation happen? Is it going to happen the day of? Is it going to happen prior to the meet? And who's going to do it? Because it is a big job. Speech people are also real picky about those time cards. Technically, by the rules in speech contests, the student is responsible for their time, but coaches sure do appreciate timekeepers and time cards. I like to make sure the time cards are going to look the same in every room. So I actually make the time cards and put them in contest packets for ours. But you also are going to want to decide, is this district going to have timekeepers or is the judge going to be the timekeeper? And if you're going to actually have timekeepers, who are those going to be? How are we going to come up with those people? So you want to have a plan for time in speech events. We have a hard time in computer science programming. We don't have a lot of coaches in our area that are real familiar with that. So while they don't mind running the written test, the programming part kind of throws them sometimes. So sometimes we have to hire a contest director for computer science programming. So you're going to want to confirm that day that there is someone in the district capable of that, or are we hiring someone? And I always like to make sure that everyone remembers and knows that computer apps is the only contest in UIL that actually requires a grader. So if you sign students up in computer apps, the rules say you're responsible for providing a grader, or your students could be disqualified. So that's just something I always make sure I bring up and that it's in our minutes so that if there were ever an issue, I know that we've covered it verbally and that it's written in the minutes because we covered it verbally. Once that meeting is over and I get back home, I frequently will start on this as soon as I get back while it's still fresh in my brain. But the UIL website needs to be set up for registration. Technically, you have until February 1st before you start getting the emails that say you didn't do it. But I just prefer, it doesn't take long and I can knock that off that to-do list and put a check by it. So I do that just as soon as we get back from that meeting. I also type up the minutes and I send them out. And the first line of that email says, please reply to let me know you got it. Because of course I've just typed in all these new email addresses and I just want to make sure I don't have a typo. And I have stopped actually attaching files so much to that email. But now I just create a Google folder and I put them all in there and I say, here's the link so that you can get to it all year long. And if there's something that I'm going to need to add to that I didn't have today, like maybe a menu from a restaurant or something, I'll add it. So that way I don't have to keep sending out emails either. They just say, oh, I added this or I added that, or they rearranged this building and here's a new map. So I use a Google shared folder now. I also try to complete the hiring process. Anybody that's going to be hired or any money that's going to be spent, I get on that just as quickly after that meeting as possible and try to make sure that's all arranged, including hospitality. I make sure that if I'm having to pay a catering company or if I'm paying a home ec department or whoever, that I make sure we take care of that. And if I'm responsible for ordering the awards, I get that done ASAP so that I make sure that they come in. I usually, in fact, for our vendor, I usually have awards way before anything else and then I have to figure out how to store them. And then I do an office supply order and I sit down and think about what do I need office supply wise to host this meet and go ahead and get all of that ordered. Because those are the things that I said again, they don't really take that long and I can get them knocked off the list and know that I had them done. Speaking of awards, these are the things we order and are typically recommended by UIL. We do medals 1 through 6, as well as our team awards. We personally do plaques and medals for teams. You would need to decide if you were going to do a plaque or trophy or what the awards are going to be. We do a plaque for champion and runner-up schools. Budget-wise, that may be, a decision you need to make. We buy our one act play medals at the same time. Even if somebody else is technically running one act play, I order the medals for the benefit of getting the bulk price. And if it's our year to be responsible for by district, you want to make sure those are being ordered as well if you're doing one act play. And don't forget, you're going to have ties. So you're going to always want to order extra. Make sure you order extra or you're going to get there that day and not be able to give a kid a medal. And then I inventory those awards when they arrive. If I ordered 127 gold medals, then I count and make sure I have 127 gold medals. And again, another way that some schools may get a discount is if you do combine with your other individual events. I said, I know we usually have one administrator, one superintendent who I just send my academic order to, and he combines it with, I don't even know what all, but I know for sure track and cross country. I think maybe golf as well. But a lot of times these medal companies will give you a discount if you're ordering in bulk. So that's another little tip that you may want to look into. Food, I can't tell you how important the food is, even though you think, oh, that's not what this is all about. This is about the students and their test. But especially if it's your first or second year, I'm going to tell you, teachers are very forgiving if you feed them well. And if you don't, that's what they're going to talk about later. I was starving all day. So I try really hard, really quick to make sure we're going to have a good hospitality room. So that way, again, if the schedule gets behind, they're going to forgive it. If I am short a medal, they're going to forgive me if they're full and they liked what they ate. Also, make sure your students are going to be able to eat. Okay, so it may be that if you're at a high school, you need to have a concession stand. We have ours, like I said, at Stephen F. Austin, and they have several restaurants in their food court, so we don't have to really worry about that. And they also offer some kind of coupon to schools if they want to eat in their actual cafeterias. If you are running a concession stand, if you don't have the manpower to run it, reach out to other organizations on campus. You can let somebody else benefit, like the cheerleaders, if they want to run a concession stand. But have a plan to feed everybody that's going to be there. And then I'm going to say, a week or two after that first planning meeting, this is when I kind of start on this stuff. And this is not a like get it done quick. These are the things that I need to do between after that planning meeting and the day of district. I really cram pack my fall just because my spring is crazy. So I would rather get as much of this stuff done early on as possible. But I mean, a lot of this stuff you technically could wait and do after Christmas if you wanted. But I do an envelope that has school tabs, which are just cut out pieces of paper in different colors for every school, for every event. And that's how we'll sort them at the end of the day. So after you've graded number sense, you get all of the papers together for one school and you paper clip them with their school tab on the top. So I have an envelope that will have however many schools are in the district little tabs and a little package of Ziploc of paper clips. And so I go ahead and get those ready early. Honestly, if I have a study hall or if I'm babysitting kids that are in trouble, sometimes I let them put paper clips in Ziploc bags. So it doesn't necessarily have to be you. But again, that's something I can sit and do while I'm binging on Netflix one evening. And so I go ahead and I get that done early, and then I just throw them in a box until I'm ready for them. I also start gathering boxes. Paper boxes are a commodity at my school, and you have to be the first one to see an empty paper box to get it for some reason. So when I see empty school paper boxes, I grab them up because I frequently need 2 for each school for every district we run. So that's a lot of boxes that I'm going to need come March. And the reason that I need 2 is that 1, I will throw the test in because remember, they can't take their test at the end of the day. I still have to keep them till the end of the week. And then 1 for any medals that didn't get picked up throughout the day. So I get 2 boxes for each school. I also use the free shipping boxes, and I have a picture of those here, I think maybe in the next slide or the slide after, that I go ahead and I have the address to each school on that shipping box and have it ready to go. Because at the end of the meet, I'm going to put all of those tests in that shipping box and seal it up until they're actually able to be released. And then it already has their address on them so that if we're going to have to mail them, they're ready to go. And then I create 2 tab room, what I call tab room boxes. One has just basic school supplies and one has files. And I also find people to help me. Now, I'm real fortunate that we've already kind of created a team. As Dr. Stevens mentioned earlier, we have a 3 to 4 person team that pretty much works the whole week together. So I don't necessarily have to secure this help anymore, but if you were starting fresh, you're going to want 2 or 3 people in the tab room with you all day. We have one person who takes in the results when they come in and makes sure that they're sorted and that everything looks good and that they're ready. We have one person that sits at the computer all day and inputs results. And then you have to have your face that's going to go run out and put out fires and take care of things. So like I said, that's our minimum 3 that we like to have in the tab room at all times. So these are those boxes. You can see that we set them up, and I actually color code them. So those labels are the same color as the school tabs would be. So when we're sorting tests, when they bring in the journalism papers at the end of the day, I honestly don't even read the school names. I just match color to color to give those out and make sure I have them in the right school box. And then we have the shipping box like is pictured on the left. That's where all of that will go in at the end of the day so that I can mail them after the official release date. So those are set up and ready to go. And I set those up way early on. That way I don't have to stress about it come March. So this is another thing that a lot of districts don't do, but I feel firmly that the papers need to actually be labeled with a student name before they're sent home. Just as a coach, I don't want to be looking at 3 papers and trying to figure out whose was whose, especially on like a science test where they just write A, B, C, D. So I don't know who contestant 42 was that day. And I just like you to write Johnny's name on the top of it. And so we've done those in a different variety of ways over the years. Sometimes we just have little slips that they staple to the test itself that would have the student's name on it. I tend to do a mail merge because I'm more technologically literate, and I just pull those rosters from the UIL website, and I actually just create labels, and you just peel off the label and stick it on the test that day after it's graded. That tells me whose paper it was. And some years we just write the name on the top of the test with a pen. But somehow I just think the coaches especially, maybe not the coordinators, but the coaches when they get their papers back really appreciate knowing whose paper is whose. And then I go ahead and I create a file folder bin that has a folder for every contest. And inside of that, I have the contest director instructions. I have verification sheets. We make everybody sign at verification so we can say, oh no, you verified that. Those envelopes that I showed you. And then once we close entries, I'll add the rosters to those folders as well. And you're also going to want to make sure you have access to a copy machine that day. So that's another little tip, especially if you're going to be off-site, for example, us at a university. We don't have one necessarily available to us, so we have one that we bring in. but there is going to be at least one thing that day that is going to need copied, I promise. And so you want to make sure you have access to a copy machine. I go ahead and get these printed, and then I make copies and have them all ready at some point early before Christmas. I have each school sign in when they arrive that day. And that's just a little reassurance to me to know, hey, everybody's here. Contest is supposed to start in 10 minutes. Hey, we're good. Or if it's 2 minutes until number sense is supposed to start and the school hasn't checked in, then I need to make sure I find out what's going on and we don't start number sense without them if they're stopped, behind a wreck or something and couldn't quite get here on time. Then we're going to need to hold up the day. And so it's just a good way to check in and make sure all of your district is there. Any hired personnel, I have them sign in too. That way I know when they've gotten there. And it also makes sure that they come check with me and I can give them their pay sheets or a W-9 or whatever the financial person has told me that they need before they can pay them. I create a director sign-out sheet so that if you're directing ready writing, before I give you those ready writing papers, you have to sign out that you're taking them. That's just so that if somebody else comes by and says, no, I'm supposed to get ready writing, I can look down and say, oh, well, Sarah took them. And we can go figure out where those papers went. I keep copies of subforms because somebody's going to need one that day. So I'll go ahead and just have some extra ones copied. I always copy a few extra verification sheets. So if somebody says, oh, I messed mine up, I can grab one. Those event labels that you saw where we post results, I go ahead and make sure those are created if I need to, or if one went missing the year before, I make a new one. And then lots of schedules and maps, because all day long somebody's going to come through and they've lost their schedule or they've lost their map and they're going to need a new one. So I'll go ahead and I get all that stuff copied before Christmas, if at all possible, and kind of set up. And this is kind of what I do with it. You'll see I have a little file box that will end up in the tab room with me, and it has all of those things in it. Right before March, I'll actually put my coordinator's manual and constitution and stuff like that in there as well. That way I have access to everything right there at my fingers if I need it that day. So this is my file, was a file box that we've used at contest. And then, like I said, I've never been lucky enough to host, even when I host my invitational meets, it seems like I'm not in my room. So I actually have a supply box like you had back in elementary school, except mine's much bigger because I have a ton of stuff in it of things that I might need that day. Because we're completely off-site, it's a pretty extensive list because I want to make sure whatever I need, I can get that day pretty quick. So over the years, it's gotten a little longer. But these are the things that I take. Most of them you'll see are traditional, just normal school supply type things. I do keep, you'll see at the bottom of the first column, a little candy dish at the door. Again, sometimes your job is a lot of public relations, and people just like to walk in and grab a peppermint. Makes them happy. Another thing is a power strip. I found a lot of times they put me in rooms where I can't plug in all the technology that I need. So I go ahead and I set up a power strip so that I know we can get everything plugged in. Again, it seems like I've never figured it out, but people come and they don't know how they're going to time the event. So I'll have a few stopwatches handy so that if somebody comes in and doesn't know how they're going to time, we can set them up. And actually only recently have I added that last one, and I don't know what it's officially called. I call it a plug adapter. But all of my technology now seems to have 3 prongs, but we've sometimes been in rooms where they only have 2 in the little plug. And so there's a little adapter you can put on the end of like a power strip, and then you can plug it into a 2-prong plug in the wall. So, fool me once. The first time I couldn't plug stuff in. The second time I haven't had an adapter so that I can adapt to that. And then we talked about this briefly earlier, but make sure you secure before Christmas everyone that is going to help you that day make things a success. Again, you're going to want 1 or 2 people in there with you, and that's all. I don't think I said that part earlier. You do not want a bunch of chaos in the tab room. While it's not an awful job, it does sometimes require your brain work. I can tell you, we pretty much shut it down when science scores come in. Because when you get science scores, you get a biology, a chemistry, and a physics score. And like I mentioned earlier, every school can enter 6. So it's a kind of a tedious process to get all of those results in. So you don't want 17 people coming in and out of the tab room at that time. So I like to have 2 or 3 helpers, and I like pretty much everybody else to stay away that day. Make sure you've secured whoever's going to help you with hospitality. Make sure you've taken care of your own contest directors. Like I said, you signed up that day to run events. Sometimes I forget to do my own job as my Chireno academic coordinator. And then I realize, oh man, we're supposed to run this. Who am I going to get to run it? So make sure that you actually take care of your jobs at home as well, and you get your directors and your assistants signed up and that they know that they're going to help that day. If you're going to have any runners, just somebody who's going to, hey, sometimes if my high school kids don't have an event till 2 and they're juniors or seniors, so they know the building well, I say, hey, hang around outside the tab room that morning. And if I need people that just need run to, to room to 23, you run them to room 23 for me. And then, of course, any of your hired personnel, like your speech and writing judges, you have got to have those secured by Christmas, especially now that we have a shorter time period for holding those meets. I find those judges are hot commodities and they get booked up really quick. Typically, because I know that I run from year to year, I actually hire my judges at this year's district meet for next year's district meet. I just say, hey, this is district week. Mark it that you're mine that week. And they're hired. So, but yeah, make sure you take care of that before Christmas or you're going to find yourself in a bind though. And again, we mentioned this earlier, but I can't go over it enough. Make sure you become familiar with as many of the rules as you can. I mean, obviously, again, you're not going to know every single rule, every detail, but at the very least, you know that that rule does exist and you can go look up the detail if you've been reading through them. Make sure you know exactly what the business manager is going to want you to need. When I first started this, we just had a paper that had their name and address and social security number. And that was good enough. But recently, a W-9 has been needed from pretty much every business manager for the last few years. So I make sure I have those as well. I actually now put that on our two-sided. I do a sheet on the front that asks them for their basic information and their email, and then I make notes on it of what they did that day so that I can remember later. And then the back is their W-9 that I will scan in and or copy and give to business managers in the days following the meet to make sure that those individuals get paid. But just make sure you know what they need. You don't want their checks to be delayed because you didn't have them do a certain paperwork that needed to be done. And then usually after Christmas, I go walk wherever we're going to go as a stranger and create signs. Okay, so I pretend I've never been here before and I started in this grand ballroom as a student and I need to get to room X. How do I get there? And I start making signs. If we're on my own campus for a meet, I actually send students to do this and double check me to make sure that, I got every turn. In this day and time, I have found Wi-Fi is almost as important as food. They have a fit if they don't have Wi-Fi for the day. So if you can make Wi-Fi accessible at your location, you are golden with the kids now, and even some coaches, but really with those kids, they want to be on Wi-Fi when they're not at an event. So if you want to find out why you're on site, is the Wi-Fi public? Will you need a password? Can they just make it public for the day? What is the procedure? But if possible, you're going to want to make that accessible probably. If it's on a high school campus, you want to get a master key so that you can go troubleshoot. And I promise you, even though every door is unlocked at 7 a.m., at 1 p.m., somehow it magically locked itself. So you're going to want to be able to unlock it. If you're on an off-site location like us at SFA, then I just make sure I know where the office is where I can go get the guy with the master key, because obviously SFA is not going to give me a master key to their buildings. But know who you need to call when you have a problem if it's not that you can fix it yourself. So those are little location things that I do when I go on site towards the end, when we go back to confirm locations and make sure rooms are good. In February, I resend every word that I have sent all year long back to the UIL coordinators in a very long and I'm sure annoying email. But this is just, hey, just in case you have forgotten back since September, in case you've lost it, in case you don't remember, whatever, here is everything you need to know. And then a lot of time there's some specific location that I didn't necessarily know back in September, like how early can they arrive, or if there is that kind of thing. Where do the buses park? Exactly where do I want them to come check in with me? Where specific, make sure they know where students need to go, any last minute information. I make sure I send that in that email. I also confirm one more time with anybody that I'm paying, all those hired personnel, that they have me on their calendar and that they remember that they're coming that day. And this is when I go through one last time and try to read as much as possible of all of the rules, all of the procedures, just to make sure that I know what I'm doing. And then once again, and I guess I should have put that last slide before this, is I confirm the location details. So we make sure that our reservation is set up, that it has all the rooms we need, that the rooms are going to be set up correctly. We don't need a ton of tables in a speaking room where they're just going to walk in and do an extemp speech, but I need a ton of tables in the science room. So just make sure that kind of stuff is set up and reconfirm those hospitality details and make sure those teachers are going to have full bellies. As soon as you receive the materials, you're going to want to get your spelling words to your spelling pronouncer and the computer science programming packet to that contest director. And I always remind them, even though they already know that they're confidential documents, and make sure, you know, they don't share those with anybody until after the week of UIL. On that morning, I try to arrive as early as I can get myself to get there. I want to make sure all the rooms are unlocked. I want to make sure that they are set up correctly, like we talked about in the reservation. I want to have my registration check-in area ready to welcome everybody. I don't want another school to beat me there. And I want to make sure that I can make sure that all schools have arrived before we start for the day, and that I have those extra schedules and maps ready and all. And it just makes me feel better if I've pretty much done my morning checklist before the first person arrives. I don't feel as rushed and feel like I'm trying to accomplish things while people are asking me 100 questions at the same time. This is how we kind of set up our tab room. We line tables around the walls. And so there'll be one table where you have all of the schools and where we put their tests and their medals. And then there's a little computer station where we have our copy machine and we have a place to input results and all of that good information. And then what you can't see is the third table on the third wall that has all the awards on it. And that's where we would have all the medals and stuff laid out so that we can hand those out through the day. But this is the basic lookup. As far as giving the materials to the contest directors that day, as I mentioned, I have a sign-out sheet. Another thing that's great for is just that if it is 2:44 as it is, and I know that math is supposed to start at 3 and no one has signed that out, I can go find somebody, because that means we're fixing to be in a bind if that contest director doesn't come get it. So it's a quick way to check and make sure things were taken, as well as knowing who took it. Inside each of these folders, we have, of course, the test and keys. We also have the rosters, instructions for the directors that tell them the process of like putting on those school tabs and stuff like that. A results sheet, which actually is combined with rosters now with UIL's system. Sometimes the medals could be sorted into these folders depending on the location and how we're doing things. And again, that verification sheet that we make, we have all the schools sign that's used to verify. And I've figured out our sorting method, and that sorting method, which for us is the envelope with tabs, is also in that folder. And I've made sure that those contest directors know how and where to verify. Typically, this is how we verify. This is the front of the stage. So the students are in there for holding. The graders are in there for grading. And when results are final, they come up to the edge of the stage. You'll see we have a tab for each school so that you know where your papers are and that you can come verify your papers and your papers only. But you're going to want to make sure you oversee that. We also tend to ask, you'll say, who can verify? Technically, students can see their papers, but we strongly encourage always try to get a coach to come with them or an adult from their school, just so that we know that nothing goes missing at that point, or that things are being handled appropriately. And recently, because we do lay out the test and key, and I should have added this to this, so I guess this is an extra tip if you're with us today or you're watching versus if you just look at this PowerPoint at home, we have a no cell phone policy at verification. Because, hey, it wouldn't take me but a minute on a Monday to take a picture of a test and a key and send that out to my friend that's going to test on Thursday. So we have a new policy now of no cell phones at verification as well. And you think you've gotten through the meet and you want to take a deep sigh of relief and probably take a week off work, but your job's not done. You need to know when you can release those tests and get them to them. At the high school level, to me, it's really important to get those tests back to the right school as quickly as you can, because they're prepping for the regional meet. You know, at the elementary level, it's not as a big time rush and you don't necessarily want to get them. But I actually try to make arrangements with schools to come and pick those up from me as quickly as possible, like the Monday following district week. You're going to make sure you get your judge pay sheets submitted to whoever is going to be doing the paying, and follow up and make sure they actually got paid. I actually email all my people that Monday that I hired and say, hey, just let me know when you get your check so that I can mark it off. Just so that you know that you've been taken care of. Because kind of like you want your teachers to leave with a full belly, you want your judges to get paid in a timely fashion so that they'll come back next year. And then part of my job, sometimes business managers will do this, but sometimes they don't, is to calculate how much each school is actually going to be accountable for and let them know. And then just a nice touch is to buy a little box of thank you cards and send them out to anybody that helped you pull this meet off. You want those people to come back and help you in the future. And a thank you note just kind of makes them smile and then they want to. And then another tip I have is to figure out how to communicate and make sure everyone knows how you're going to communicate. And if you can figure out how to do that day of, it's even better. So when I gathered that contact information, I try to get coordinators' cell phone numbers so that if I need to call or text them the day of because Johnny isn't available or we think Johnny cheated on the test or whatever, I can get in touch with them quickly versus running all over looking for them. In this day and age, most people have smartphones and you could just do an email, but everybody doesn't check email on their phone. Apps like Remind are pretty popular now. You could create a group that day of all your coordinators and then text them all in bulk. And this last year we had a invitational meet that actually used the Band app. And it is something it's kind of like almost like a social media and texting at the same time because you can send the pictures and updates but you can comment on things and ask questions and everybody be in the same page the same time that day. So that may be another option to communicate, but have a communication system that day, especially let's say number sense has to be moved to room 302 instead of room 204. You need a way to tell people. And so you want to have a communication system. And then I wanted to throw this out there. This doesn't actually pertain, but I think going into our 2020-2021 school year, especially, I'm sure many of you are like me and we don't even really know what this year holds. And so I wanted to make sure my students at least get some competition this year if we don't have any invitationals before district. And I'm just going to hold out to hope that district's going to happen. But if we can't get any invitationals because we can't go to other schools, we're able to hold our own on our campus through virtual challenge meets. And this is where you give the test at your own school, you submit the results, and then you're given your results compared to the rest of the state. There are actually 6 tests through the year. And I got told that if you'll say you were at this presentation or that you watched this presentation, he'll give you $50 off if you're a first-time subscriber and send you a goodie as well from Virtual Challenge Meets because he's kind of like me and feels like this is a really good thing going into this year and maybe the only way we get to compete before we start actual district, regional, state levels. So at this time, if we have any questions, that is the end. There's one more tab that I will start, I guess, before we do. If you would like to see any of my files, like my verification sheets, if you'll fill out this form or email me, once I can get back in my classroom, I've been locked out because they're redoing the floors in our building, I'm going to get all those documents together and put them in a Google folder, and I would be glad to share them with anybody that would be interested in them. So if you'll just either fill out the form or shoot me an email and say, hey, send me those files when you get them all together, I'd be glad to show you samples of the documents that I use. And that's it.
Great.
I am ready for questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Is there a way you can copy that forms link you have and stick it in the chat box, Kimberly?
I bet I can. Let's see.
I'm not able to do it from where I am. So
okay.
We're going to try that. That was a question somebody had.
Awesome.
Oh, and somebody wants to make sure they get the discount for BCM as well.
Yeah.
While we're talking about that, there's lots of options on the UL website on the academics homepage under resources. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of those vendors who are going to be trying to do some virtual stuff.
I bet so too.
So, and as Kimberly alluded to, right now we're going to do our very best to keep the UL calendar as it is and do it as we have it planned. You and I and whoever may know it may not be possible, or it may. We don't know at this point. So just know that we're looking at all sorts of different options of what we can do and what's possible. So there are a few questions that were presented. Do you have a checklist you can share? And this was early on in your presentation.
Yes, I can put that in that folder. I don't think I have it typed up yet, but I could easily type it up. That's still one of those things that my brain works better pencil to paper, so I handwrite it every year because then I can remember it. But I'll put it in that shared folder if you fill out that form or email me.
Great. Yeah, another question. Do you have a plan for ties? Do you have a formula, or is there some magic number you do get an idea of how many extra medals should be ordered for ties?
If it's year one of the alignment, I'm very generous because I figure I can save them for next year. Actually, and I didn't mention that, but I don't put years or school names on the medals. That way they are reusable that next year. If you had bought medals last year and you had years or school names on them, well, you spent a lot of money that you're probably wishing you didn't. So I'm pretty generous. So, I would say I probably order 20 to 25 extra that first year. And then I see how many I used. And so I use that for the next year. Because I've always been assigned to a 2 year, alignments are 2 years. So if I get assigned to run a meet, I'm assigned to run it for 2 years. So I kind of go under that assumption.
Great. Yeah, and there's I know Kimberly also talked about how sometimes the district executive committee, they'll do medals for all of the spring activities: golf, tennis, track and field, and academics, and one-act play. And sometimes you're the person who's in charge of trying to get all those just for the academic meet and one-act play meet. So make sure you double check with your administration or the district executive committee to make sure they're not already doing something for awards. So it is often a shocking moment a couple of weeks before your meet when you realize, oh, I was supposed to order the awards and I didn't. So. And then you had a question, Kimberly, and somebody typed in the chat box for everyone. It's a 3-prong adapter.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what it was called, but I know I now have one in my box.
There you go. What is your recommended start time when running the district meet? My school is still deciding how to handle the school day during the meet, depending on start time.
I like to start as early as possible, so 8 or 8:30. But it really depends on how big the district is as well. Most of you don't know where Chireno is, but I am closer to Shreveport than any major city in Texas. I am almost to the East Coast. And I have been with schools in my district that were down on the Gulf. Okay, so we're talking, 4 or 5 hours between our schools maybe. And so if that's the case, then we may start later to allow driving time so that they're not on the road at 3 in the morning. But I personally, 8:30, I like to start number sense at 8:30.
Great. Good. I don't see any more questions in our chat box.
Okay.
We'll stick around here for a few more seconds in case somebody else pops one up and has something. But we really appreciate all your information. There's a lot of valuable information in there. We do have Kimberly's slide up on the Capitol Conference online page. So make sure you go there and get it because it'll be very helpful if you're running that district meet. And as she alluded to, we're your best friends during that time because you're doing something not many people are willing or able to do, and that's offer to host the district meet. So we want to service you and help you out as much as possible.
The funny story about that is the first year that we agreed to run it at Chireno, my superintendent didn't know what a spring meet chair was. On the way home, when I told him, he went, "We're doing all that?" And I went, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we are." So it's a big job.
We appreciate it. We also have the district academic meet manual, which we'll have updated before the school year starts, that we try to put a lot of this information in there so you kind of have a step-by-step guide. So be sure you get that downloaded and we'll do what we can. So a lot of great comments coming in. Let's see. Do we know what UL is going to do regarding UL in 2020? One rumor is that they're going to do it in the fall and then UL 2021 in the spring. We do not know that. I know there's been 150,000, if there's been one, ideas of what can we do. Flipping spring and fall events is one of them, but that's not a great solution because where you put basketball. Do you run track in November and December? I don't know that that's a good idea, but I have no idea, and nobody does. And it's just like, all these officials who are making the big decisions, they're just going through with line items. There's nothing we can do. So, and no for sure. So, no idea. But no, to my knowledge, there's no serious talk about flipping seasons at this point. It's going to see what happens with college. Football drives lots of everything that we do. So it'll be interesting to see what college football does, how we go that. But don't have any other questions, a lot of great thank you. Is it possible for UIL District Region State to be hosted via virtual online? At this point today, if we had to do it in a month, no, it is not. We are doing lots of research and looking to see, is there options of how we could do this? Are there programs where we could upload the test and it releases it and it's only available for 30 minutes? A lot of it depends on if kids are in school or not. If you're in school and teachers could supervise that test-taking ability, I think it would be possible. If we're all virtual still, it's going to be very difficult unless we have some sort of program that, you know, releases to the student. And so, but we're going to do something. We're going to have tests written, and if we have to do the at-home experience like we did in the spring, we will do that. So we will do our very best to not have to cancel everything and do what we had. So that is certainly our goal. But as of now, there is no change in the calendar. If you go to the UIL website and look on the calendar, there is the week of district meets, there's the region meets, the state meets, they're all on the calendar, and our plan is to keep those as they are currently on the calendar at this time. So a lot of people are asking us about fall invitational meets, and that sort of is the same response. If the school hosts it, it's going to be up to the school to follow whatever TEA guidelines in that school district follows and how they do those things. So but we're going to do our very best not to cancel things and have everything we can possible again and get us as close to what we used to do as we possibly can. So that's everybody's goal, just so you know. But thank you all very much. I think we're good with recording. We're going to stop that.